What's going on out there, everybody? Sheriff Brian Weatherford, how you doing out there?
Good morning, sir. It's an honor to be here. The
Glad to
home
have
of
you.
the home of Leif Babin, Woodville, Texas, baby.
Oh my goodness. Well, hopefully there's some statutory limitations on the multiple crimes committed by a teenage Leif Babin in Woodville, Texas.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely correct, sir.
Right on. I know he was a little bit of a handful when he was growing up.
And I had the privilege of coaching his brother, who is now our district attorney as well. So, man, it's very interesting in Tyler County, Texas.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well,
Yes,
thanks
sir.
for joining us.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it.
Thank you.
What's up, everybody? Where are you calling in from, Brad Caruso?
Good old East Brunswick, New Jersey, down over here.
East Brunswick, New Jersey.
You bet.
How's everybody out there doing?
Everyone's doing great.
Normally I'm talking smack about weather across the country because I'm out in California and I'm in San Diego where it's 70 degrees and sunny most of the time. But it has been just epic, crazy weather here. Insane rains. The waves, if anyone on here surfs, the waves have been, I've had the best waves I've ever had in California. Jamie called me today. She's like, "Hi, stranger." She hasn't heard from me for a while. Well, why is that? There's good waves. I got stuff to do, Jamie Cochran. So great to be on here, everybody. Jamie Cochran is also on. She's the Chief Operating Officer at Echelon Front, and also got Codey Gandy, who's one of our lead instructors at Echelon Front. And we're going to talk to you about some leadership tactics and tools that we can use. Also interestingly, I'm a reserve police officer. Codey's a reserve police officer. And when I became a reserve police officer, one of the first things that happened was I got enrolled in this thing called Lexipol, where we were able to gather and garner information from around the country. And a lot of you know what that is. And one thing that recently happened at Echelon Front is we formed a partnership with Lexipol. We're going to be doing some courses on leadership and putting those up on the Lexipol platform. So y'all be standing by for that. It'll be coming out in the next few months. I think we're recording it in a month or two, and we'll get that up there for everybody. But just be looking for that. I think it's pretty cool. Everybody knows that we at Echelon Front support first responders, fire, and law enforcement as much as we possibly can. And we know that getting this information to everybody was a good thing to do. And Lexipol is a great platform to do it through. So be standing by for that. And just to kick this thing off today, I wanted to talk about something it's one of those things that I kind of put together. If you've ever heard me talk about the fact that I train jiu-jitsu, and as I train jiu-jitsu, I started to understand other aspects of life because of training jiu-jitsu. A lot of tactical things I started to understand, a lot of gunfighting I started to understand, a lot of leadership I started to understand. For instance, in jiu-jitsu, when you're trying to do a move on somebody, you don't just do that one move, you use another move to cover your actual attack so that people get caught without expecting what's coming, which is basically cover and move. That's what we do on the battlefield. We have one person lay down fire and another person can maneuver. And it's what we do as leaders. We support the rest of our team. I learned in jiu-jitsu that fancy moves, complicated moves, often you need a pretty decent amount of luck to make them work, and that the simplest moves are the most reliable ones and the most consistent ways to win. And it's the same thing in combat. I'm sure you all have heard the combat theory of keep it simple, stupid. So I brought that over from jiu-jitsu. I learned that in jiu-jitsu, if I focus my whole body, the strength of my whole body against one of your limbs as my opponent, that's how I'm going to be able to make you submit. And what that is prioritize and execute. It is focusing your efforts against enemy weak points. And finally, I learned in jiu-jitsu that my instincts as a human had to be honed so that my body, my arms could move, my legs could move without me having to tell them what to do, without having to think about telling them what to do. And in the military leadership, that's decentralized command. When your team is executing things without having to be told what to do. When you get really good at jiu-jitsu, you don't have to think, oh, I better move my arm now so it doesn't get arm locked. No, it automatically happens. So those are some of the things that I learned in jiu-jitsu that applied to everything else in life, applied to combat, applied to leadership, the correlations between humility and detachment and ownership and all these other principles that I brought from jiu-jitsu that I really made a lot of connections to the rest of my life in the battlefield and business. And there's another thing that I was thinking about as I was considering what to talk to you all about today. And it's something that you learn in jiu-jitsu for sure. You learn it in fighting for sure. You learn it in combatives for sure, but it applies to a lot of different things. And that is distance management. Distance management. So in jiu-jitsu or in fighting, I want to make sure that I control the distance between me and my opponent. I want to be in control. I want to manage the distance between me and my opponent. That's what I want to do. I want to either stay far enough away from them that they can't hurt me or they can't hit me because they're too far away, or I want to be so close to them that they can't hurt me. Where I don't want to be in what I call the kill zone, which is if I'm fighting Codey and I'm at the perfect range of one of his punches, he can hit me and that punch is going to knock me out. Whereas if I step back a little further, now his punches don't hit me. And if I get too close, now his punches don't have any power. So I, as a fighter, need to manage that distance. I need to manage the distance that I am away from my opponent. And in combat, the same thing applies. Obviously, if you're too far away from the enemy, you can't identify them. And if you're too far away from the enemy, then they are out of the range of your weapons. Now, it plays vice versa too. So I want to be far enough away that their weapons can't touch me. And then I've got to pay attention. I've got to manage the distance so that when I get close enough, when I get in range, I'm in a good position. Now, we can also get to a point in combat where we're too close to the enemy. If you get too close to the enemy, now all of a sudden you're in a situation where you can't call in close air support. You can't call in air assets. You can't call in artillery because you're too close. You're too close to the enemy. And actually, the enemy uses that tactic against us oftentimes. They call it hugging, where the enemy will try and get, because usually as Americans, we have superior air power. And so the only way for them to negate that is to get so close to us that we can't safely drop bombs on them. So what does this mean? It means that I, as a leader, need to manage the distance that we are from the enemy. So we got two components here. One, if I'm going to fight with Codey, I want to manage the distance. If I'm in a combat situation, I want to manage my distance from my enemy. And the same thing happens just from a leadership perspective. I want to be able to control the distance that I am from a problem. I want to make sure that as a leader, I control the distance that I am from a problem. If there's a gunfight going on, as a leader, I want to get to a distance where I can see what's happening with my own eyes, but still be far enough away where I can minimize actually needing to engage targets myself, right? If I'm in a leadership position, I don't want to be looking down my weapon. I don't want to be shooting targets. I want to be able to look around. I want to be able to see what's happening. So as a leader, if there's a problem, well, any kind of tactical problem, but not just a tactical problem, you might have a personnel problem. You might have an administrative problem. There might be a problem on Codey's team. If I'm so far away from Codey's team that I don't even know that he's got a problem, I can't do anything to help him solve that problem. You know, he's got a person on his team that's not behaving correctly. And look, maybe Codey gets it handled. That's great. But I got to be close enough to his team that I know what's happening, that I can see that he's got an issue, so I can give him the support that he needs. But I also want to remain far enough away from the problem to say, hey, you know what, Codey, if you got a problem with that individual, don't worry. Jamie's got a team over here. She's got extra people. I can give her one. All of a sudden, I'm far enough away from the problem that I can see it. So there's a little bit, you can probably hear this theme of detachment coming through, taking a step back, looking around. That's distance management. And as police, as firefighters, as first responders, what you have to do all the time is manage distance. And that's what I want. That's what I want to get into your head today. I want you to think about that, is how you're going to manage distance. And what's highly disappointing, and I apologize, but I actually can't give you a formula to determine the correct distance in any scenario, whether it's a combat scenario, whether it's an emergency scenario, whether it's an administrative scenario, a leadership scenario. I can't give you a formula to measure the correct distance, because in all these different situations, there are so many different variables that there really is no formula. There's no two fires that are the same. There's no two shootouts that are the same. There's no two arguments between two people on your team that are the same. So I can't give you, hey, oh, when this is the situation, here's the distance that you need to be. Even as much experience I had in combat, I could still not look at a young platoon commander and say, oh, when you're doing an assault on a target, you should be 82 meters from the front door. Can't say that. There's too many variables. Maybe 82 meters, there's a ravine and you can't see anything. So what I can do, the best I can do, is cover a few guidelines to help you with distance management. And the first guideline is just to think about distance management. Think about it. Just have it in your head. Be aware of it. Whenever you're in a dynamic situation, be aware of the distance. Be aware of the geometry of the situation that you're in. Be aware of it. And like I just mentioned, if you have good cover, I might be able to get closer to a problem. If there's no cover, I probably got to be further away. If I'm the only person on scene, if I'm the first person that shows up on scene, I'm probably going to keep a little bit more distance than as soon as Codey shows up. I can push a little bit closer because now Codey can keep a little bit more distance. If you have a ton of backup, all of a sudden, oh, I can take charge, and maybe I can not take charge of the overall picture, but I say, hey, I'm going to solve this problem myself. So sometimes you might close that distance. But the first step to distance management is to be thinking about it. A lot of times I see people, they're not thinking about their distance management. They're just going with their natural instincts, and oftentimes their natural instincts are wrong. And I think that's another thing to be aware of, is that different people have different tendencies. Many people have a tendency to be drawn into a problem. They get drawn into the problem. We see a problem and we want to jump right in. And oftentimes we actually train that way as well. You know, I'll train Codey, hey, you got to be default aggressive. If there's a problem, you got to get in there. That's the way I train Codey. Well, guess how Codey's going to behave? There's a problem. He's going to try and close the distance and go solve that problem. So beware of that tendency that we have. At the same time, also beware from a distance management perspective that sometimes in a dangerous situation, people have a tendency to create too much space, and they avoid the problem. They don't attack the problem. They move away from it. So you've got to be aware of what your personal tendency as a human being is. Are you going to be a person that's default aggressive? Are you a person that hesitates? And you've got to be aware of what your tendency is. And then you've got to be thinking about it when you're in that scenario. If you think you're usually too default aggressive, then train yourself to take a step back. If you think you maybe generally as a person hesitate, then train yourself to move forward. And that can be very beneficial. And here's the last, so those are two things, right? Think about distance management. Think about what your tendency is. And finally, as a leader, remember that whether your initial move is to move forward and close the distance or move back and create distance, remember that whether that's your initial move is to move forward or move back, remember that you do need to move in order to get a different perspective. So this means when you're in a leadership position, oftentimes it can be good to oscillate between moving closer, seeing what's going on, and then taking a step back and checking the big picture, and then moving closer to get another feel for the problem, and then moving back for looking for some alternative solutions. And don't just think of this as physically doing this. A lot of times I'm doing this mentally. I'm mentally, maybe I'll take a few steps in, maybe I'll check in with Codey. Codey, you're in that building. What do you got? Do you need support? And then Codey's like, we're okay right now. Boom. Okay. Now I'm going to look up and see what other assets I have coming. So if he does need support, how can I get it to him? So my mind is oscillating between seeing what's going on up close and then seeing what's going on further away. As you move around through various distances and angles, you will be able to see more. And when you can see more, you'll be able to understand the problem better. And obviously, this will allow you to find a better solution. So, in everything that you do, from gunfighting to firefighting to fist fighting to decision making to interacting with people on your team to interacting with people on other teams, pay attention to your proximity to the target and then manage the distance. And that's what I've got for today. Codey, you got any additional input on that?
Yes, sir. As you're talking, we're talking about distance, and people always ask the question, like, where do I put myself in relationship to this problem? And I know you said you don't have the formula to get people in that spot. We see this a lot at the FTX or field training exercise, where you have 1,000 problems and people are asking, like, where do I go? Where do I position myself when I'm in charge of everybody, the front, back, side, all these things? And take into consideration this distance, it's in close proximity to the concept of, hey, knowing your friction points that you face every single day. And friction points are areas where there's going to be an issue. For example, if I'm in charge of 12 people and I enter a house and I know that every time we do a long stairwell or we hit an unknown or we take a stairwell that I'm going to hit an issue, I place myself in close proximity or far enough away so I can best support the issue. That is what this ultimately comes down to. Managing distance comes down to how can you best support your team. And the more proficient you are with your job, the more that you know your team, cover and move, the easier it is going to be for you from a detached perspective to understand, I need to be closer here, I need to be far away here, I need to let go a little bit, and I need to gain much perspective. All these things, it's all in relationship, and it's interesting how you spin all this stuff, but there is no correct answer. Everybody's going to be different to whatever problem that you face. So